Hey everybody, Greg Kazillo from Kazillo.com. I have some photos today that I'm going to go over because there was a question about a week or two ago that someone actually commented on YouTube and asked me, said, well, what's your workflow on choosing your exposures and, your shutter speed, your aperture, your ISO? So the workflow is kind of the wrong way to put it, but it is a way of thinking. For the most part, I feel that a lot of this has to do with your style of photography, and so all I can really do is explain what I was thinking, and then you can apply it however you want to apply it in the future. I'm not, I can't control your style. Maybe you like some of my photos, and maybe you can take part of my style and apply that to yours. But having a photographic style of your own is just it's just a matter of time, how you want to shoot, your equipment, the lenses that you work with, what you've been exposed to, the arts and things you've been exposed to in the past. So think about that as I'm going through all these photos. Now, this first photo, this little boy took obviously on a porch. Well, maybe it's not that obvious. It was on a porch, a pretty deep porch, probably about 10 or 15 feet deep from left to right. This is obviously the railing, this is the wall, and he's obviously sitting in a rocking chair. But I wanted a nice portrait. I wanted your eyes to concentrate on him, not really pay attention to the background. That means shallow depth of field. So with that shallow depth of field, we're going to be at 2.8. Now, I couldn't back up real far, because as I remember, I actually took this during one of my classes that I was teaching. And so, since I couldn't back up, there are actually people standing behind me. I could only zoom in to 70 millimeter. That's why you still have a little bit of blur, or not a real heavy blur back here, not a heavy bokeh back here. 2.8 ISO 320. Now, when I'm shooting, the two that matter to me are my aperture and my shutter speed. My ISO is wherever it is. If it's at 6400 because it's dark out, it's at 6400. If it's at 800, it's at 800. I don't worry about ISO. I know that's a luxury of having a D3 and a D3S, but I still don't worry about it. It is what it is. If you have a more recent camera, D90, D7000, D700, D300, any of the more recent cameras, same with the Canons, their ISO, high ISO is getting better and better too. So you're not going to have an issue with it, and just shoot it and don't worry about it. Worry about creating awesome images. Don't worry about having a super, using a high ISO. And in fact, I proved that point that you're better off getting a proper exposure at a high ISO in an earlier video versus underexposing because you're afraid of your ISO, afraid of high ISO and noise, and just don't worry about it. It's really not a big deal. Just shoot it and do it, and the photo will be fine. And unless you're underexposing, then obviously it's a problem. But proper exposure up to your camera's maximum, 3200, whatever it is on the D7000 or 6400 on a D3. I've printed 16 by 20s, 20 by 30s at 6400 out of my D3 all day long, and the 3200 and a D7000 looks great. So it's really not an issue. So don't worry about that high ISO. Don't be afraid of it. Is the point there? So anyway, shallow depth of field, f2.8, 70 millimeter. At 3/20th of a second shutter, and that's just a matter of making sure that number one, I don't have any camera shake, and number two, that he is stopped, because little kids are always moving and moving. So obviously, want to make sure that he's caught and sharp. Now, this next photo I did, obviously, it's not really a worry here with that high shutter speed, because an adult can stand still, at least usually they can, but I still want to keep that above a 200th of a second. Most of the time I do, and let's see where I'm at here. I lied on this one, I'm only at 1/125th, but still not really an issue. My baseline for a lot of my portraits is 2.8 or my maximum aperture at 200th of a second. I might have dropped it down because it was a little bit darker here. I don't know why I did it. It's one of those things that you just do at the time. My normal way to go on this is to bump that back up to 200th of a second and then have my ISO a little bit higher at 400. That's my normal way to go. Not sure why I didn't do it this time, but point is there that still a shallow depth of field, although it's not really showing that shallow depth of field because the subject behind her is still close. Now the reflection in the glass here is out of focus, so that's a good thing. Whereas here it's just stuff behind him that's out of focus. So you still want that stuff out. Didn't want that sharp, and actually you can kind of see my tripod legs because at the time I was shooting a video of this. So still want some of that stuff to be out, and even if it was just you in the frame, you would still want that to be out of focus in the background, in this reflection in the glass back here. Next photo I did was for a client who's actually a local landscaper, and amazingly enough, I actually shot this at 2.8, I believe. Yes, at 2.8. Now let's talk about the photo a little bit first, though. They install pools, they do landscaping, they do pretty much all the hardscaping, they do it all, the patios, everything. So they wanted to show a little bit about that, and this is just one of a bunch of photos that I've taken at this one particular house. Point being is that there was a path here with the hardscaping. I think they had done the pool here, all the softscaping, all the plants and all that stuff. So there was a lot of work going into this, and they wanted some great photos for the website. So what I wanted to accomplish in this photo was to have this. You can't really tell because it's on Flickr, but these plants and stuff back here are just slightly out of focus. Okay, now since I am a little bit farther away and my initial subject is farther away, or my focus point is farther, that's why it isn't as blurry. So we could take two identical photos and just have the subject, 25 feet away versus 5 feet away. The one with the 5 feet away is going to have a much blurrier background versus the one that's 25 feet away, just because of the way your lens works. So that's we have basically the same settings, very, very close to the same settings as far as our aperture and our focal length between this one and this one, 2.870 and 2.895. It's basically the same thing. So the difference there is very slight, and so that's there. You can see the difference in between what the result was. And again, I just wanted it to be very slightly out of focus back here. I didn't want a whole lot, so that's why I created it. And I believe that was with my 70-200 lens. Looking. For some reason, I'm not seeing it. 86 millimeter. Yeah, that tells me it would have been with my 70-200 lens. So, yeah, so that's another example of using 2.8, but in a kind of a landscape kind of a situation. Still thinking about how you want to create that image. Here's another good example of another image where I'm only at f4. I'm still pretty wide open, but everything is in focus basically. Since I was shooting with a wider lens this time, I had my 24-70 on, 24-70 2.8. So being at f4, still everything was, everything is super, super sharp because it's a wider lens. When you have that wider lens, you need to get really close to everything in order to get that shallow depth of field. Whereas with the 70-200 or a longer lens, it's not as big of a deal. That's why I promote and that's why I push the 70-200 lens so much, because it's so versatile and so flexible. It's like the perfect range, and the 2.8 you get a lot of light coming in. That's why I love the 70-200 lens so much. Not to say my 24-70 or 14-24 aren't awesome lenses too, but I just love my 70-200. So anyway, 1/1000th of a second because it was a bright day out. F4, everything was still in focus. Okay. Notice I don't care about. I'm not really talking about my ISO. It's not really a big deal to me, so it's not an issue. At the horse show, I actually shot this last year. One of the horse shows that I do, and really pretty horse. That was a really cool photo. I love the woman's hat and the ponytail. Really, really cool photo. And obviously the horse is my subject, and his eyes are nice and sharp. You might not be able to tell from flicker in this video, but I will put the link up for that. Anyway, 2.8, 300 millimeter lens. That's why that background is really blurry. Between that and also it's much farther away. My subject is real close and the background is real far away, so that's where I get that really, really blown out deep bokeh. Now, thoughts here are: horses are moving, they're running, people are running. I need to have a fast shutter speed, and it actually works. Fast shutter speed usually comes with wide aperture, 2.8. So that means I get a lot of light in there, and then I also get my high shutter speed, so I get the best of both worlds there. Now, when you're talking about macro or tighter photos or very, very close, I don't remember what lens I took this with. Let's find out. 105 millimeter. I took that, yeah, this with a 105 millimeter macro lens. Point here is that when you get closer, the closer you get to a subject, your depth of field gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller at the same aperture. So at f4, at say 5 feet, your depth of field might be, say, 2 feet. But then once you get down to like 6 inches away, that depth of field might only be like 3 inches. So you need to think about that when you're shooting like this. I actually shot this at f3.0. A little bit off, just gave me a touch more. I wanted to make sure that anything in the background was blown out. And actually you can see that her ears are already out of focus and the top of her head. Also, Mom was helping me pose her, so if her hand was in the background, I wanted to be a little out of focus. So it's, that was how I was thinking with this one. ISO 800 and 1/100 of a second. Again, I usually keep that a little bit higher. I don't know why I was doing it this time. You know what it was? Probably because I was mixing it with flash. Probably what was going on there. Last photo, which we kind of talked about already, was with sports and sporting events. This photo, typically, I've had a 300 millimeter lens, I believe. Yep, I was shooting my 300. My shutter speed was high. That's obviously my priority when I'm shooting an event like this. But in this particular photo, they're not moving fast, but still, it's in between, so you're not going to change all your settings in between from one shot to the next in a sporting event like this. So my shutter speed was pretty high, and that again goes with a wide open aperture because we get more light coming in. So we're at that left me open at that 2.8. So that's all the photos that I have for you today. Quick review: this one priority, high shutter speed. This one priority, depth of field. Okay, want stuff in the background blurred out. This one priority, high shutter speed because everybody's moving, but since the subject is close, I still get that nice bokeh in the background. This one priority, everything in focus, super sharp, the whole 9 yards sharp. Still at f4 though, but I knew with the short lens that I had on the 24-70 lens that I was still going to keep everything sharp. Priority on this one, very slight background blurriness. So that's what we got here, and again, that was shot at 2.8. Priority on this one, portraits, shallow depth of field, 99% of the time, that's what I go for, although it's not a perfect illustration of it, but you can kind of see that the door is sharp, and then the background in the reflection is out of focus. And priority on this one, once again, was the subject, the portrait, and we're going to have that depth of field priority. So I hope this helped you guys. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'd love to hear them. Please comment down at the bottom of the page. I'd love to hear them. All right. Greg Casillo, Casillo.com. Keep shooting. See ya.